Can you think of a time that someone was treating you poorly or someone you were with because of the color of your skin or language you speak, either at school, work, as a child, and an adult? Can you say your name before you answer, please?
This is Julia Torres. I can remember in middle school some kids making fun of other Mexicans in the class, and I'm half Mexican, and so I said something along the lines of, "Hey, I'm Mexican too," and the kid told me, "Don't worry, you can't tell." And I didn't know at the time how wrong that was. It took me time to. I kept thinking about it all day, and now that I'm older, it stuck with me all those years. And other than that, I have suspected that we've been treated differently when we go out to eat as a Mexican family, because I was in the serving world for a long time, and I can tell when you're not being treated the same or given the same attention as other tables, but I can't say for sure if it was based on the color of our skin.
Oh my god.
My name is Ausencio. Um, it's hard for me to think about a time, but the only time I can think of that it might have happened is when I was interviewing for a manager position. I moved through four different interviews during the process, and on the fourth interview, I just got a different vibe from the person I was interviewing with, and I ended up not getting the job. So it made me feel like they had an idea of who they wanted to hire, and when they saw me in person, I was not that person that they were looking for. So that's the only time I can think of that I experienced something like that.
How do you react when you see on the news or you hear people say, immigrants are taking jobs away from Americans or immigrants are increasing the crime rate?
Um, I feel pretty frustrated because I've worked in the restaurant industry for many years and alongside immigrants that made up most of the back of the house of the restaurant. And I know for a fact they're not taking jobs away, they are filling the jobs that a lot of Americans don't want to do. As far as the crime rate, it's also frustrating, and I happen to know that the statistics show that they don't increase the crime rate. They actually commit crimes at a lower rate than citizens. But um, at this point, I'm pretty jaded by the news, but I do share that with people when they are trying to make that point. I share with them that it isn't true.
Um, so I kind of agree with what Julia said. Um, I do come from the restaurant world as well, and most of my career in the restaurant business, I manage um, people coming from other countries, and it was very rare to see someone from here wanting those jobs. Washing dishes, cooking. Um, Always the focus was on getting jobs on the from the house as a server or bartender, but I never really saw that. And as far as crime goes, I don't think that's the case. But um, I don't have the um, proof or specific. Um, can we read? Well, and another point I would like to make is as an immigrant myself, we're mostly focused on trying to make ends meet and support our families. So um, I don't agree with the fact that people think that immigrants come here to steal jobs or that they commit crimes because as an immigrant myself, I'm more focused on making a better life for me and my family.
What are your feelings regarding immigration as we go into the next presidency?
Well, as an immigration lawyer, I have pretty grim outlook on what to expect in January, and a lot of it has been preparing clients and prospective clients on getting their assets in order, if they do have any avenues for relief or becoming a permanent resident. We've been trying to do that as quickly as possible. But for a lot of people, it's just preparing them for the worst, and it's almost similar to preparing someone for their estate if they were to pass away, by figuring out where their citizen children would live and stay with, how they would access their funds, their home, their belongings if they were to be suddenly deported, which is what the new administration is promising to do. So I'm worried, not personally because I'm privileged to be a United States citizen, but I am worried for the millions of hardworking immigrants here in the U.S.
Well, how I feel is, I feel relief. I was able to become a citizen 4 years ago, and I was with this in mind that at some point things were gonna change. And I'm a little scared because I have family members that are here illegally, and I'm worried for them because they've been here for so long that for them to go back to Mexico will be very challenging. Their kids are all born here, and that'll be very devastating for the kids to either separate from their parents or to go live in a country that they're unfamiliar with. So I'm a little nervous when it comes to that, but on my side, very relieved and grateful that I'm able to not think about that too much.
How do you feel about the role immigration law plays in people's lives?
Well, it depends a lot on whose lives we're talking about. But I've worked with immigrants, and I've also worked with Americans who are petitioning for an immigrant, like a loved one or a relative or spouse. And I always find it interesting that Americans are so shocked at how difficult the system is to legalize a loved one, but it doesn't seem to shock immigrants as much. But there's definitely a correlation between someone's general privilege in their home country. They are usually shocked that it's also going to be a difficult process for them too. But mostly I kind of, sometimes I find humor in it that Americans who have never had to deal with immigration law are so taken aback by the fact that their cleaning lady that they love so much and has worked for them for 20 years has absolutely no avenue to permanent residency, and it only begins to shock them once it's affected someone close to them. But it makes sense at the same time. But yeah, it definitely varies depending on who you're talking to.
Can you share a story about a case that particularly impacted you?
One case that has always stuck out to me is a young man that was brought here as an infant, but illegally, and then lived his entire life here. And after a series of, run-ins with the law, he was facing deportation, and facing deportation to a country he had literally no recollection of, since he was only an infant when he came here. And we fought really hard and were able to get him to stay in the U.S., but based on his criminal history, he'll never be able to become a citizen. And a lot of the criminal history he ran into was at a very young age, and basically due to a lack of parenting and supervision. And it just breaks my heart that there's really no difference between him and somebody who was born here, but he's severely limited by how far he can go in life, just based on where he spent the first 8 months of his life.
As an immigration lawyer, how do you feel about institutional racism, which is certain policies that are rooted towards white privilege?
Well, as an immigration lawyer or not, I definitely believe in it and see it. But because I've studied immigration law, one of my favorite points to share with people that do doubt in institutionalized racism is that the very first immigration law ever created was called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is exactly what it sounds like. And there was no shame or no trying to disguise what they were doing. They were trying to exclude Chinese immigrants because there were, at the time, European immigrants and Chinese immigrants, and the European immigrants were more easily able to blend in with the Americans here, but they wanted Chinese to leave because they, and the exact words from Congress at the time is because they were not easily assimilating. And now, Congress knows better than to use that direct language, but just based on the charts of how many visas we allot to each country, we have restrictions for India, China, Africa, the Philippines, and Latin America, and no other countries. So basically, all those countries have in common is a darker skin color. So I like to point that out to people too. As an immigration lawyer, I see those numbers every day. And, there's no limit for the European countries. So that says a lot about institutionalized racism.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced during the immigration process?
The biggest challenge that I faced was that I had to leave my family for a long period of time. The only way to get my residency was to go to a interview in Mexico, and at that point I didn't know if I was gonna get it. There was a possibility that I could get denied and I was gonna get stuck in Mexico. But I think that was one of the most challenging things. One, because I had to be away from my family, and two, my wife was pregnant at the time with our second kid, so she had to be the breadwinner for the family, and do everything herself while I was gone. So I think that was very hard.
What challenges did you face in pursuing your education in the U.S.?
Well, the first challenge I faced was I didn't have my parents here with me, so I didn't have any financial support from them. And then the next thing was that since I was an immigrant, I didn't qualify for financial aid. So that put a huge barrier for me to continue my education. And lastly, I had to have two jobs to be able to support myself, since my parents live in Mexico and not here.
What were the biggest challenges you faced in learning a new language?
the biggest challenge was that oftentimes in my culture, like rather than someone encouraging you to get better, they make fun of you. Therefore, it makes it very challenging to be able to, in this case, try to speak English because you know you're gonna be made fun of because you're gonna make mistakes, and that kind of makes you slow down on learning the language because you don't have the courage to use what you've learned. And I think that was one of the biggest things for me at the beginning when I was trying to learn the language.